Hello, everybody. Welcome to Hedonist Radio. And today I wanted to talk about hedonism in practice. So, of course, there's the misconception of hedonism is kind of like unconscious pleasure seeking. And that could not be further from the truth. So I figured I would go into this whole thing a little bit more in depth, give you a feel for what the archetype is, and I'll explain the archetype piece in a moment. But just kind of unpacking that more. So back in May, during, I think it was the Sagittarius full moon, I had all these downloads about Hedonist Radio and the Hedonist Project and all of these things. Great, wonderful, fantastic. So with the birth of this project, I really was inspired by the idea of hedonism. I felt like it was something that I was really missing in my life. And then the interesting thing happened a few months later. I ended up ordering this book called Sacred Contracts by Caroline Myss. And in that book, you have to pick out, your 12 intimate family of archetypes that are most closely related to your soul in this lifetime, in this incarnation. And I started cracking up when I saw that the hedonist is one of the archetypes that was in there. And it just blew my mind because it is absolutely about pleasure and experiencing that in the material world. So that's kind of my whole thing is it's an intimate part of my soul. Literally a part of my soul in this lifetime is to seek pleasure, experience pleasure, have more pleasure in this lifetime. Another way to look at the hedonist archetype is like the chef, right? So wanting to experience the finest things in the culinary world, that type of person is also someone who experiences the hedonist archetype. That doesn't mean that every single chef who exists has the hedonist archetype, but it's the archetype of the chef would also fall into the category of hedonist. They're kind of married together, if that makes sense. They live in the same realm. So let me explain what hedonism is not in terms of practice. Hedonism is not sloth. Hedonism is not gluttony. Hedonism is not unconsciousness. Okay? It's not that at all. And I completely understand why there would be a conception of if you seek pleasure, if that's something you really need to lean into in this lifetime, that it could lead to things like gluttony, greed, laziness, right? Like if you're just laying around, not doing anything with your life, smoking weed all day. And it's like, of course, now we're seeing careers emerge from that, but there's a lot of work behind that. I digress. But I'm saying the stigma and the stereotype around these things, or like if you're seeking a lot of pleasure from sexual relationships, that can be done in a way that's safe and healthy, and it can be done in a way that's very unconscious and unhealthy. So depending on what's going on with all of that and what the context is, that's really where you're going to see a split, where hedonism lives in a healthy way and where it becomes unconscious coping behavior that's not good. So it's kind of like having really healthy, enjoyable, good sex in this lifetime. That's awesome, right? That's what we aim for, whatever that looks like for you. Having random, unsafe sex with people that you're not comfortable with, or in a space that's just for the hell of it, where it's completely unconscious, that's not hedonism. That's unconscious behavior. So that's kind of what I'm trying to split off right now in terms of what this really is and what it means. The same goes for any type of drug, alcohol, sugar, cannabis. All of those things would also fall into this category. Like if you are in a really stressful time and the first thing that you go to is a drink, not hedonism. That is not hedonism. That is not pleasure seeking. That's unconscious behavior. And there's a big difference between that and hedonism. So hedonism is weaving in more pleasure, experiencing the pleasures of what life has to offer in this experience as you have an earth body, as you have physical form, being able to do that. And so that's the difference is it unconscious or is it conscious? And of course, it's like with every archetype, there's a shadow side. So the shadow side of the hedonist archetype is unconscious behavior, like gluttony, like overstuffing yourself or overusing substances, right? And so, of course, that's always a risk. Like if you are really prone to addiction, then hedonism is probably something you don't want to play with. For me, hedonism is something that I need to lean into more because there are so many elements of my life that lack pleasure and that have been lacking pleasure for a long time. And so this is something that actually takes a lot of consciousness and active application in my daily life in order to achieve being able to enjoy, a drink or a nice meal or having fun taking a class, doing something, or whatever it could be in the realm of hedonism, leaning into my sexuality more. And I'm one of those people where it's like, I've gone years without having sex. I have like long dry spells where I'm not having sex at all or having like a sexual relationship with anybody. That has been my experience. And so experiencing sensuality, experiencing my sexuality, leaning into things like this become more of a practice, which is where hedonism comes into play. If this was something that I was just kind of going off the rails with and being unconscious with, then you're falling into some shadow elements which are not going to be helpful, to say the least. So that's the main thing that you kind of want to keep in mind. Same goes for self-care. So let me riff on self-care for a second. When it comes to self-care and hedonism, I find that because pleasure is one thing that I'm missing, right? So if you're missing discipline, this probably won't apply to you. But because pleasure is one of the big missing elements of my life that I'm actually pursuing and that I love deeply, playing with my sensuality, my senses in general, is something that I get a lot of pleasure from and that I experience a lot of freedom with and that just qualifies as self-care. So the reason why that is because there are other areas of my life where I'm doing a lot of heavy lifting, I'm extremely disciplined, or it's like when one area of my life is super unbalanced, the hedonism element actually tempers everything for me. As I lean into that, it's something where the rest of my life actually becomes more balanced and I reach equilibrium. Self-care is not eating a box of donuts. Okay, then you're slipping into gluttony, unconscious behavior, shadow side of hedonism. That's not the healthy, evolved version of hedonism at all. So that's one of the big issues that I've had with people is like qualifying unconscious behavior as self-care, I think is absolutely ridiculous. In my opinion, I just don't think that works. I don't think that that's a reasonable assessment by any means. The same thing goes for, and I know this is going to be a really unpopular opinion, but I really don't give a shit. If you have a drink after work every single day, really every day, I have a hard time believing that that's actually pleasure-based, and instead that might be falling into habit territory or addiction territory or unconsciousness territory, one of those. Because I don't think that if you're consciously pursuing pleasure, if you're really in touch with your body, your body is not going to want alcohol every day. I don't believe that there's any human that functions well with alcohol every day. I really don't think that alcohol is something that people should be doing on a regular basis. Again, that's just my opinion. That's just what I found. Really not good for you. And I do drink sometimes, to be fair. Not going to hide that at all. But it's something that I consider to be more of like an occasion or something that I'm intentionally, like there needs to be a reason or something that is super, super planned, or it needs to be attached to something that makes it special, not unconscious or like, oh, I had a really stressful day working today, so I'm gonna go unconscious by having a drink. These types of things, I'm not, like, I understand that people might struggle with that and whatever, but I would not actually say that that is a healthy practice of hedonism. And so I wouldn't want anyone to fall into the mindset of, oh, all I want to do is binge eat sugar and drink a bunch of booze and smoke weed all day. Therefore, that's hedonism. Look, I'm enjoying myself. No, 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 no. That is not how this works at all. This is about conscious pursuit of pleasure in a way that is a healthy addition to your life. It's not something that is designed to be a toxic coping mechanism that derails your life or damages your relationships or holds you back from your goals and aspirations. That is not something that hedonism falls into in a healthy expression of that. I think I mentioned this in the last episode, but I'll say it again. Hedonism or pleasure across the board is going to be defined differently by everybody. So one of the things that I find to be incredibly pleasurable is finishing a to-do list. It doesn't get finished often because I'm always adding things to it, but feeling a sense of completion or reaching a goal or creating a final product or finishing a project, these things are really, really exciting and enjoyable to me. The same goes for exercising discipline or getting like some stretching and yoga in during the day. These things make me feel really aligned and supported and grounded. And so I would also make the argument that in order to truly experience pleasure, one of the things that you do need to keep in mind is, how are you taking care of your vessel? Regardless of whatever ailments you might have going on, right? Because that can totally coexist alongside hedonism, but not neglecting the body. You can't neglect the body and be dabbling in hedonism or using like hedonism as an excuse or like, oh, hashtag self-care, I'm going to neglect my body. That's not what this is. And I think that especially, you know, in the age of Instagram, and granted, I love Instagram to death, but when all you see is people basically neglecting their body or doing something that really isn't the best thing for them in that moment, you know, if it's something that's super unconscious, then it can be something that you can reflect on in your own life as justifying things that really aren't good for you or not taking care of yourself for the sake of pleasure. But it's one of those things where you can't really enjoy pleasure without discipline. You need both. And if one of those is imbalanced, like a lot of the time I fall into overworking, overstressing, overfunctioning, overdoing, beating myself up for not getting enough work done, right? So I'm very, very heavy on the side of pursuing my goals to the point where I have to lean into pleasure in order to maintain my sanity and well-being. And that does not mean that I don't exercise, I eat whatever I want, I don't give any thought to the substances that I put in my body. Is it the right time for a drink? Is it the right time to smoke? Is it the right time to do, whatever else? So there's a lot of consciousness that needs to be involved in the pursuit of pleasure in order for it to be done in a healthy way. And I know a lot of people really don't give a shit about health, and it's all consume, 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 and that's all anybody can focus on. And I understand, that whatever, do your thing. That's fine. That's all good. No judgment, but it's not something that I personally am interested in from that standpoint. I think, it's I love to smoke weed. I love having good meals. I love laying on the couch and watching Netflix sometimes. I love all of these things. They're so good. And pleasure and enjoying myself and having, healthy sexuality, however I'm expressing that or weaving that into my daily life. That's something that I'm doing, but it's not exclusively that, and cutting out all disciplined elements of my life. So that's something that I really feel strongly about, because I think you have two extremes that people see a lot of polarity when it comes to all of this stuff, as far as it's either someone who is like, I'm going to have one piece of Halloween candy and then I'm going to work out in the gym for 5 hours tomorrow. Okay. Come on, just eat the candy and live with yourself. No overcompensating in the other direction. That's also something that is way too extreme. Or okay, this is my one donut for the year. I mean, you can do that, but it's also people are bombarded with extremes. It's either extreme discipline to the max, and then there's also extreme lack of discipline, where it's just extreme gluttony in all forms. Gluttony around drinking, gluttony around smoking, gluttony around eating, gluttony. And so my whole thing is we need both of these things. Both are necessary. It's just that I've had the experience of being overly harsh on myself, lacking the pleasure piece, and needing to consciously weave that into my experience. So that's kind of where I'm in a slightly different position around all of this, just because my vantage point when I'm looking and observing all of this, I feel like there's a big missing piece regarding hedonism and just what it really is and how I personally practice it and weave it into my life. So, anywho, remember, gluttony is not the same thing as hedonism. Hedonism is just understanding that while we're in this human form, while we have this flesh bag that we're in, the beauty of this is that we do get to experience a lot of pleasure. We do have these awesome senses that we're dealing with, and that's something that I want to take full advantage of in this lifetime. I don't want to miss any cool opportunities or experiences because I'm overly disciplined. And in the same breath, I don't want to damage my body and my vessel by overusing, overabusing, neglecting my body either. You kind of need to balance those scales if you're going to be doing this in a way that's conscious, mindful, and have it not slip into addiction, habit, unconscious territory. All right, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate you so much. Please take a moment to subscribe. I will have more episodes out soon. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at The Hedonist Project. And until next time, have a beautiful, beautiful week, and I will talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.